So imagine you hire this hyper efficient assistant, right? And they promise to do like the bulk of your work in seconds.
Sounds like the dream.
Right. But somehow their arrival leaves you way more exhausted and just, overwhelmed than before they even walk through the door.
Yeah, it's a very real paradox right now.
It really is. And welcome to today's deep dive where we're basically dismantling the biggest illusion of our current technological era.
The promise of save time.
Exactly, the promise of save time. We have a really fascinating stack of sources today. We're looking at a set of memos from a conceptual framework called civilization analysis.
Right.
And alongside that, a very specific, pretty provocative document titled AI Doesn't Reduce Work. What's increasing isn't execution, it's judgment.
And the reason we're tackling this is because of this massive sort of unspoken friction that we're all experiencing.
Yeah, because the pitch for artificial intelligence was incredibly seductive.
Oh, absolutely. Press a button, the machine does the heavy lifting, and your calendar just magically opens up.
Right. But here we are. The tech produces a perfectly formatted slide deck in like 3 seconds. So why am I still sweating at my desk at 6 in the evening?
Well, that gap between the marketing pitch and your daily reality is exactly where we need to focus today.
Because it's driving people crazy.
It is.
Yeah.
So, to understand why you're still sweating at your desk, our mission today is to treat these sources as an observation device.
Okay, an observation device.
Yeah, we're using that civilization analysis framework, which it's important to define right up front for you listening.
Definitely.
Civilization analysis isn't sociology, and it's not, a tech review blog looking at the latest software updates.
Right. It's much broader than that.
Exactly. It's a lens for observing how entire societies fundamentally restructure themselves, how they change their habits and their labor around new tools.
So we're looking for the underlying architecture of this shift. We're not going to offer like 3 quick life hacks for your inbox.
No life hacks today. The goal is to hopefully trigger a fundamental shift in how you perceive the weight of your own workday.
Which is desperately needed. Because right now, the collective intuition out there is just pure confusion.
Yeah, people are just tired.
Right. We don't need to spend time debating whether the technology is fast. I mean, if you're listening to this, you already know the raw output is skyrocketing.
Oh, undeniably.
We know an AI can instantly generate Python code or, write marketing copy or summarize a 50-page PDF.
The physical act of generation has been completely decentralized.
Exactly. The machine is doing the creation. But my frustration, and I think the frustration of pretty much everyone listening, is that my workday feels infinitely heavier.
Heavier, yes.
Yeah.
That's the exact word.
The draft is instant, but there is this lingering, just invisible weight to everything I touch now.
Well, what you're sensing is the very first layer of a massive structural shift.
Okay, break that down for me.
So the physical acts of generating have indeed accelerated, right?
Yeah.
Just like you said. But the source memos point out a really profound counter effect. The subsequent acts, reading that generated output, selecting the most relevant parts, correcting the inevitable hallucinations, and ultimately judging the quality, those have increased in exact tandem with the AI's output.
Wait, I gotta push back here because this is where people usually get stuck.
Go for it.
Isn't reviewing a document fundamentally easier than, like, writing one from a blank blinking cursor?
That's the logical assumption, yeah.
Because if the AI spits out a functional 5-page proposal, why are we complaining about having to just click approve or, make a few tweaks? On paper, that sounds like a total luxury.
It does. It sounds like a luxury until you examine the psychology of choice and cognitive load.
Okay, how so?
Well, think about it. When you write a proposal from scratch, you're following a single linear thought process. You are the architect, right? You're laying one brick at a time.
Right. I know exactly where I'm going with it.
Exactly. But when an AI generates a proposal, or more accurately, when it generates 3 different variations of a proposal for you to choose from, you're no longer laying bricks.
What am I doing then?
You're suddenly acting as a building inspector.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you have to hold multiple parallel realities in your head simultaneously. You have to read a sentence and constantly ask, is this true? Is this my voice?
Right. Does this align with the broader strategy?
Exactly. Reviewing isn't a passive activity. It requires this state of absolute hypervigilance.
Okay, That makes an uncomfortable amount of sense. It completely changes where the bottleneck of the work actually is.
It moves the bottleneck directly into your brain.
I was actually trying to visualize this while reading through the notes, and it reminded me of this kind of strange scenario.
Let's hear it.
So, imagine you decide to delegate all your cooking to a hyper-efficient master chef.
Okay.
You think, fantastic, I am never going to chop an onion or boil water ever again. I'm going to have hours of free time every single evening.
A very tempting premise.
Right, I'd sign up immediately. But instead of just bringing you a finished meal at dinner time, the chef starts bringing you 50 slightly different variations of a dish every 5 minutes.
Oh, no.
Yes. One has a bit more salt, one is like slightly spicier, one is a deconstructed version, one uses a dairy substitute.
That sounds exhausting.
And the chef just stands there staring at you, asking you to taste test every single one. You have to approve every single ingredient and make the final call on which one gets served to your guests.
So you're not cooking, but you're working harder.
Exactly. You aren't chopping onions anymore, but your palate is entirely blown out. You are completely exhausted from the constant tasting, analyzing, and decision-making.
That analogy actually captures the exact structural change detailed in our sources.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Execution, the manual task of chopping the onions or, typing the code is decreasing.
Right.
But decision-making is decidedly not.
Mm.
In fact, decision-making is multiplying exponentially.
Because there are so many more options to choose from.
Precisely. You've simply traded the physical labor of generation for the intense cognitive labor of curation. And that shifts the burden of failure entirely onto you.
Oh, man. Which brings us to a really heavy concept from the civilization analysis memos.
The gradient.
Yes, the gradient. When I first read that, my mind went to, like, a color gradient in a design program, but that's not what the authors mean here at all.
No. In this context, a gradient refers to a structural slope, or like a rate of compounding pressure.
Compounding pressure.
Think of it like water building up behind a dam. The source material lays out a very specific formula for this gradient, mapping exactly how this pressure compounds on the human worker.
Okay, what's the formula?
It's a chain reaction.
Yeah.
Generation goes up.
Because of the AI.
Right. Therefore, options go up.
Okay.
Therefore, judgments go up.
Right.
And ultimately, responsibility goes up.
Wow. Generation to options to judgments to responsibility. Let's ground that formula in reality, because this is the exact trap I fell into just last week. Well, I had to write a somewhat delicate email to a frustrated client. And normally I'd sit down, stare at the screen for 20 minutes, type it out, and send it.
Slow but straightforward.
Exactly. It's just me and the keyboard. But this time I asked the AI to draft it. And it did, instantly.
Of course.
But then I asked it to make the tone a bit more empathetic. Then I asked for a version that was more firm. Then, like, an apologetic one.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. Suddenly I'm staring at 15 different variations of this email.
So you increased the generation, which immediately increased your options.
And staring at those 15 options, I didn't feel relieved at all. I felt completely paralyzed.
Because now you have to judge them.
Yes. I spent more time reading, comparing, and just agonizing over the subtle nuances of the word regret versus apologize than I would have spent just writing the original email. My fear of choosing the wrong tone just skyrocketed.
And that fear, that's because the machine doesn't take the blame if the client gets angry.
Right. The AI doesn't get fired.
Exactly. The machine has no social capital to lose. That fear you felt is the final variable in the formula. Responsibility.
It all falls on me.
When options multiply, the burden of selecting the correct option falls entirely on your shoulders. The core misunderstanding we've been operating under as a society is that AI functions as a machine that reduces work.
But it doesn't.
It does not.
Yeah.
It functions as a machine that increases judgment.
Man, if we're just trading the execution time of drafting an email for this massive compounding cognitive load of having to judge 15 variations of it, then efficiency is a complete illusion.
It really is.
We've basically optimized the factory floor to produce 1 million widgets an hour, but we completely ignored the quality control department.
That's a great way to put it.
And now you and I are just standing at the end of the conveyor belt, completely buried under a mountain of widgets required to inspect every single one before it goes out the door.
Which forces us to critically redefine what the concept of work actually means in this new era.
Right. What are we actually doing all day?
If you're listening to this on your commute or, sitting at your desk, think about your inbox right now. You might feel like you're failing because you are so incredibly tired at the end of the day.
Even though you didn't physically make as much from scratch.
Exactly. But the sources point out something fascinating about the density of modern work. Work isn't disappearing. Its internal density is radically changing.
The text calls this densityification, right?
Yes, densification. We are experiencing densification rather than true efficiency.
Meaning the work is just thicker.
Right. You might be spending the same 8 hours at your desk that you did 5 years ago, but the number of micro-judgments you're forced to make in those 8 hours is 10, maybe 20 times what it used to be.
Because I'm not spending 2 hours researching and typing out a single document.
No.
I'm spending those same 2 hours reviewing 20 different documents the AI generated for me, checking them for accuracy, tone, and, strategic alignment.
The nature of labor is physically relocating. The civilization analysis memos frame this shift really profoundly. They state that human labor is moving from time consumption to meaning selection.
Okay, moving from time consumption to meaning selection, we got to translate that because it is conceptually beautiful, but incredibly dense.
It is a bit academic, yeah. Let's break it down.
So if I'm understanding the framework correctly, your value to your company or just your function as a worker in general used to be tied to how much time you consumed to physically make a thing.
Right, you were the generator.
You're the generator.
Your primary output was the execution of a task over time.
But now your fundamental task is no longer make this.
Exactly.
Your fundamental task is take responsibility for choosing the right version of this out of 100 possibilities.
Yes, you are the meaning selector.
So your value isn't in how fast you can type anymore. It's whether you have the taste, the context, and the judgment to know which of the machine's 50 ideas is actually the good one.
And providing meaning requires a completely different, much more exhausting type of cognitive energy.
Because it's not just automatic.
Right. A large language model does not understand meaning. It only understands statistical patterns of language.
Right. It's just predicting the next word.
Exactly. It doesn't know if a piece of code introduces a security vulnerability that could bankrupt your company. It doesn't know if a marketing slogan violates a brand's core values.
It just generates it.
You have to supply the meaning. You have to overlay human context onto machine patterns.
Which loops us right back to the weight of responsibility.
Always comes back to responsibility.
Because if there's a hallucinated number on slide 4 of the deck the AI built, the software program isn't going to be fired.
No, it is not.
You are. The doing has been automated, but the owning has been amplified. Every unread message, every generated draft is just a demand for your judgment.
And following the specific rules of the civilization analysis framework we're exploring today, our goal is not to tie this up in a neat little bow.
Right. There's no easy fix here.
No. We aren't going to offer a tidy solution because, frankly, there isn't one yet. The framework dictates that we must expose the gradient, illuminate the structural pressure, and leave you with the unresolved questions that naturally arise from this observation.
It's really about letting the awareness of this structure change your cognition. Once you see that conveyor belt of endless widgets, you really can't unsee it.
Precisely. So we have to look at the open questions straight from the text.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first being, is AI truly reducing work, or is it merely creating a mountain of invisible work?
Yeah. That invisible work of reading, selecting, taste testing all 50 dishes, and correcting the errors.
Exactly. The second question the authors pose is about human limits. How much further can human judgment actually increase?
That's a scary one.
Right. If the machine gets twice as fast and generates twice as many options next year, can your brain realistically make twice as many micro-judgments in the same 8-hour window?
I mean, there has to be a biological ceiling to our cognitive load. We aren't microprocessors. We suffer from decision fatigue.
We do.
Like we said earlier, you can only taste so many dishes before you literally can't tell the difference between salt and sugar anymore.
And critically, the third question, who ultimately holds the responsibility? Does the human remain the sole subject of judgment as the volume of output scales to infinity?
Wow.
This deep dive is an observation, not a conclusion. As the source material explicitly states, just to remind us of our place in this timeline, this conversation is still ongoing.
Yeah, we're all just waking up to this structural reality. We're right in the messy middle of the shift from execution to judgment.
Very messy middle.
But building on those themes of cognitive load and responsibility, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final thought to mull over as you head into your next meeting or, open your laptop today.
Leave them with something to think about.
If our entire professional existence has shifted from creating to judging, and the technology continues to generate exponentially more options, creating an ever increasing mountain of invisible cognitive load, will there come a tipping point where our human bandwidth simply snaps? Will we become so paralyzed by the sheer volume of choices that we surrender and start asking the AI to make the final judgments for us too? And if we surrender that judgment layer, if we give up the heavy, exhausting responsibility of meaning selection, what exactly is left for us to do?